I told myself I was just getting the salt. That's all it was. A few steps across the kitchen, a quick grab from the second shelf, then back to the bubbling pot and my husband's familiar laugh. Nothing unusual. Nothing to notice. But I think he saw it before I did. The shift. We'd all been drinking wine, just enough to soften the edges of the evening. The kind of night where the kitchen is too warm and nobody cares. Plates stacked in the sink, kids running in and out with bare feet, the dog trying to lick the cutting board when no one's looking. It was loud, comfortable, safe. And then I opened the pantry door. Creaked a little the way it always does. I stepped in barefoot, the cool tile against my skin, and reached for the salt jar. I heard him behind me, not my husband. Him. The younger one. The one who wasn't supposed to be watching me like that. He said something about looking for the pepper. But there was no reason for him to be that close. No reason for him to follow me in. I turned to say something, and instead, I closed the door behind us. Just like that. And I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe, I wanted to see if what I thought was happening was. The moment that door clicked shut, everything shifted. The laughter outside felt like it belonged to another world. And the space between us shrank into nothing. I could feel it. In the way his eyes didn't move. In the way my fingers trembled just holding the jar. I should have opened the door. Walked out. But I didn't. And in that breathless silence, between jars of cumin and cinnamon, he looked at me like he'd been waiting for this moment all night. And I realized so had I. I didn't look at him right away. I stared at the spice rack like it held the answer. Coriander. Paprika. Sea salt. Things that didn't matter but suddenly mattered so much. Because if I turned around, if I looked up, he'd know. He'd see it written all over me. That nervous flutter in my chest. That warmth blooming low in my stomach like something dangerous. And I don't think I could have hidden it. He was close. Too close. I could feel him behind me, not touching but there. Like gravity. His breath hit the back of my neck, soft, not even intentional. And my whole body tightened like a wire pulled too far. I gripped the shelf. The glass jars clinked. God. I whispered. You shouldn't be in here. It sounded stupid the moment I said it. Weak. Because I hadn't opened the door. Because I hadn't moved away. Because he hadn't even touched me yet. And I couldn't breathe. Then he said it low, rough. I know. That's all. Not sorry. Not nervous. Just certain. And that's what broke something in me. The way he said it like he knew exactly what I felt. Like he'd felt it too. I turned then slowly, carefully. And there he was. Looking at me like I was something he couldn't quite believe he'd been given permission to want. His hand brushed my wrist. Casual. Maybe accidental. But my skin lit up like it remembered something my brain didn't. And I didn't pull away. We could hear voices outside. Plates being set. A chair scraping the floor. But in that tiny airless pantry, between a half-used jar of cloves and a man I shouldn't want, I stood still, letting the tension build like a match waiting for a spark. And then he moved just a little closer. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. He just hovered. Like he was waiting for some final signal, some breath, some tremble that said yes. And maybe I gave it. Maybe my silence was the yes. Because a second later, he leaned in. His lips didn't go for mine. He didn't rush. Didn't ask. Instead, he found the place just below my ear. Soft. Exposed. Where my pulse betrayed everything I'd tried to hide. The second he touched me, I lost track of where I was. It wasn't a kiss. It was heat. Warm breath and skin and the tiniest brush of his mouth, like he was tasting something forbidden. Not out of hunger, but curiosity. My hand flew to the shelf behind me. I needed something to hold or I would have sunk. The jars shifted again, that sound soft glass tapping. Like the whole room was holding its breath with me. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because if I opened my mouth, I'd say something I couldn't take back. Or worse, I'd moan. My body was betraying me in real time. Chest rising too fast. Goosebumps blooming up my arms like he'd drawn them there with his lips. I could still hear my husband's voice through the wall, asking where the salt was. And I stood there, heart pounding against spice-stained air, being kissed in a way no one should be kissed. Quietly, like a secret being written on skin. His hand touched my hip. Barely. And just like that, I leaned in. Maybe I was the one who moved first. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Because when he whispered my name, everything inside me answered back. And I didn't want to stop him. I don't know how long we stood there. Time felt strange. Like it had melted. Like the moment was stretching itself out just to keep us inside it. I should have opened the door. I should have said his name like a warning. But I pressed closer instead. His fingers slid up my arm slow like he was memorizing the shape of me. Every inch he touched felt more real than anything in the room. It wasn't fast. It wasn't desperate. It was worse. It was careful. Like he was trying not to scare me, or maybe trying not to scare himself. And somehow that made it so much more dangerous. Because careful meant intention. Careful meant he'd thought about this. Imagined it. Just like I had. I leaned my forehead against his chest. And in that tiny space between cumin and cinnamon and years of pretending, I let my breath fall into him. He held it there. Didn't move. Just breathed with me. And for a second, I forgot. I forgot who I was supposed to be. What this would mean. That outside this pantry I was someone's wife. All I knew was his hand on my waist. The heat between us. The way my body had already made the choice before I could. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes searched mine, not for permission but for proof. That I felt it too. That this wasn't just curiosity. Or wine. Or loneliness. And when I didn't say anything. When I didn't step away. He kissed me. Soft. Deep. Like he already knew how. Like he'd been kissing me in his mind for years. And in that kiss, every rule I'd ever written for myself just disappeared. Because suddenly, not wanting him was no longer an option. I've never been kissed like that. Not in the middle of something. Not with voices right outside the door. Not with this kind of restraint so hot it felt like a kind of cruelty. He kissed me like he didn't want to break me, but also like he couldn't stop. Slow. Deliberate. His hand cradled my jaw, not firm, not possessive. Just certain. Like he already knew the shape of me. I was barely breathing. Every sound outside made it worse. A laugh. A clink of silverware. My husband saying something I couldn't even process. I should have felt sick. Guilty. Panicked. But all I felt was wanted. Like I hadn't been in a long, long time. His other hand found my waist, steadying me. And then, he let it wander. Just enough to make me gasp. Quiet, sharp. A sound I hadn't meant to make. But my body didn't ask permission anymore. I think I whispered his name. Not to stop him. Just to hear it in the dark between us. And he said mine back, low, rough, like it burned on the way out. He touched me like I was a secret he was finally allowed to keep. Like this had been building. In glances across crowded rooms. In polite hugs that lingered too long. In that night he helped me wash the dishes and our hands kept brushing in the water. God. This had been happening long before the pantry. This was just where we stopped pretending. I felt the edge of the shelf pressing into my back. The cool jars rattling as I shifted. Needing more contact, more warmth, more him. And he gave it. Not all at once. But slowly, like he wanted me to feel every second of it. And I did. Every breath. Every inch of space closing. Every single part of me waking up. And just when I thought I might fall apart, he pulled back. He pulled away like it hurt him. Like if he didn't, he wouldn't stop. And I just stood there. Breathless. Staring at him in the dim pantry light. My pulse everywhere at once. He didn't speak. Neither did I. What was there to say? Everything we couldn't say had already been said. In the way my hands had found his chest. In the way his lips had pressed into my neck like a question with only one answer. But still he stopped. Not all the way, he was still close enough to feel. His hand was still at my waist. But something in his eyes shifted. And I saw it. The line. The one we'd both just crossed. And weren't sure how to uncross. I turned my face to the shelf, pretending to look for the salt again. It was right in front of me, had been the whole time. But I couldn't pick it up. My hands were shaking. He reached around me, slow, silent. His chest brushing mine as he grabbed the jar himself. Placed it gently in my hand. Like that made it okay. Like that could undo what just happened. But when his fingers lingered on mine, just for a beat too long, I knew it wasn't over. I knew this wasn't just one kiss in a dark pantry. He opened the door. Light from the kitchen poured in, harsh, ordinary. It made me flinch. He stepped out first. Like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just rewritten the way I would feel about my body for the rest of my life. I followed a second later. Salt in one hand. Something heavier in the other, shame maybe. Or hunger. And I smiled at my husband like I hadn't just let someone else taste me in the dark. But even as I sat down at the table, my skin still remembered his hands. Dinner was loud. Too loud. The kind of noise that normally made me feel safe. Familiar. Forks scraping plates. Kids interrupting each other. Someone talking over the music. My husband touching my shoulder as he reached for the wine. But tonight, it all sounded like static. I passed the bread. Laughed at the right moments. Answered questions I barely heard. But inside, I was still in the pantry. Still braced against the shelves. Still feeling the press of his chest against mine. Still aching in places I didn't even know had gone numb. Across the table he sat like nothing had happened. He was joking with someone, his hand wrapped around a water glass. And yet, every now and then I'd catch it. Flicker. His eyes meeting mine for half a second too long. The corner of his mouth twitching like he was remembering the taste of me. God. I could still feel where he touched me. Like my skin had changed texture in those spots. Softer. Warmer. More awake. I took a bite of salad and nearly dropped my fork. Because for a split second it felt like his hand was still on my thigh. Still tracing slow, dangerous circles no one else could see. He didn't touch me again that night. Not even a brush of fingers. But I felt him everywhere. In the way I sat. The way I breathed. Even in the way I sipped my wine. Slower now, like my mouth still remembered him more than the taste. And the worst part? No one knew. Not a single person at that table suspected a thing. They laughed. They talked. And I sat there. A woman pretending to be full, while every part of her was still starving. And I started to wonder, what would have happened if he hadn't stopped? After everyone left, I did the dishes. It was late. The house was quiet again. My husband was upstairs brushing his teeth. The kids were already asleep. Just me, the sink, and the memory of a kiss I hadn't meant to give away. I held the sponge like it might scrub the heat from my skin. But nothing could. It was still there. Buried under my ribs, pulsing behind my knees. The pantry door was half open. And I couldn't stop looking at it. It didn't creak now. Didn't hold any secrets. But I could still feel the air inside, how it had changed. Like it knew something it wasn't supposed to. He didn't text me. Didn't linger when he left. Just a small smile, almost nothing. But I saw it. And I knew that what we'd done wasn't nothing. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't meaningless. It was hunger caught in the wrong moment. Desire pressed between shelves of cinnamon and sin. And now it lived inside me. I climbed into bed later that night. My husband reached for me, soft, familiar. And I let him. But my body didn't answer the way it used to. Because someone else had already opened something in me. Something that didn't close when the door did. And maybe nothing more will ever happen. Maybe that kiss will stay locked in the pantry forever. But I know this. He tasted me first. Long before dinner was ever served.